Trebartha is located on the east side of Bodmin Moor, near a parish called North Hill. The area itself goes back almost 1,000 years ago, when mentioned in the Domesday Book of 1086, when held by Robert, Count of Mortain. Here at Trebartha, in the past, through the Industrial Revolution, the area was mined for tin, for copper, and apparently enough gold to make a ring. And that's probably why you see a lot of the larch being planted in the old growth of larch, supply of pit props for the mining. This must have been to feed the Industrial Revolution. Here we can see some of the family's policy on planting exotic conifers for mainly amenity. This is heavily regarded as the most important part of the family policy, and is undertaken by the foresters. Here a large old growth Douglas fir. This is the garden fringes where the woodland meets the formal gardens. Araucaria, Araucana. These even producing small seed here at Trebartha, some regeneration, as well as some underplantings. Huge old Sitkas. And that's, the woodland matching the garden edge and the underplanted species, a lot of different species, all intermingling, added to the ecology and the biodiversity. A lot of different age groups as well here at Trebartha. Some old growth, a nice open space there that's going to be ready to be planted, probably with Douglas fir. Here we have some larch Eurylepsis, and then some larch in need of a thinning amongst some broadleafs to encourage some natural regeneration underneath them. Here is a small coop of Sitka spruce ready to be thinned. They've been marked up by the forester. This one exceptionally large, away from the rest of them, perhaps a natural regen of sorts. Perhaps just had a good spot and a recent wind blow. This will need to be cleared when the area is thinned. The forester's policy, he wants a certain amount for this, and he'll wait until he gets that amount. An ash tree showing some signs of canker is marked to come out. This is standing in amongst a group of natural regeneration of hardwood in this coop of exotic conifers. Note the ground floor is much more rich and diverse under the hardwood than the Sitka spruce. This one has been marked to be left as a standard tree, probably amongst the coppice after the whole area is thinned, once the right price is achieved by the forester. Rich array of ground flora there. Here, in the same plantation, some Douglas fir, been planted too close to this old oak here and has subsequently died out, while the other ones beyond the drip line have reached better maturity. And all through Trebartha you can see old growth being left. This lovely old oak with natural nesting holes, real niche habitat. A grand fir in the background, another example of solitary trees planted. So an old beech, and a very big old sycamore, just helping the spatial dynamics, and an absolutely outstanding western red cedar, Thuja plicata. Just an enormous base, roughly about 8 metres around girth. Here some old stand of Douglas fir and larch, bordering a recent plantation of Douglas fir. And the same again, very young Douglas fir coming in amongst the old stand. Sitka spruce pushing through the brambles on their way up. Here, an unused access track. This ought to be brought in, as the family have a policy on liking to access a lot of the woodlands for walks. So this would be a good opportunity to perhaps suggest to open this one up. And here we are in a recent Douglas fir plantation. Small coops all amongst these old growths, filled in almost, as the area was apparently not planted before. Evidence of pruning. That's the forester's policy, to prune up, to encourage ground flora, and to make the trees much more valuable. The knotty core is reduced. Here it must have been an old Sitka spruce. Natural regeneration when this was planted and was left, it wasn't grubbed out. It's interesting to, use of natural regeneration in amongst introduced deforestation. Some old tracks, some old extraction tracks that have showed compaction lasting for many years afterwards. And an unusual little opening in the middle of this coop, showing some southern beech, a little trio southern beech, showing some storm damage as well, recent storm damage. Just another example of unusual exotic species being dotted in and around, old growth, natural regen, smaller forested plantations. That's the end of the small coop of Douglas, bordered by sort of natural regeneration of hardwood. This is the top end of the woods, showing a stand of what I've been told is probably French origin oak, about 120 years old. These were stripped out, probably the most valuable timber had come out, as contractors were allowed to come in and take what they wanted without probably being overlooked, as vast areas were opened up, and only 2 regenerated oaks were found as we were walking through. You would have expected to see a lot more than that, but it was just mainly birch in the gaps, huge amounts of birch. Some attempts to underplant with oak these gaps to try and get some younger age groups, younger dynamics coming up through. Another view of just the open gaps left by this recent felling, probably about 30 years ago. Looking at some of the old decayed stumps. Here's some old squirrel damage. We see a lot of squirrel damage around these woods. This is apparently the policy by the gardener is to use 3 traps allocated at the garden edge, probably protect the garden trees more than anything. But most of the regen is being attacked by squirrels. I mean, some new damage here. The beech, very badly attacked. All over the site. I mean, I think it needs to be a national policy to eradicate the grey squirrel by any means necessary. Here is at the east side of the woods. This is where a recent hydro pipe has been installed. And a 10-metre swathe going on for about 500 metres through dense natural regen. This is a good spot for perhaps large raptor birds to catch their prey, and to also have some gap dynamics. In the distance there you can see some more examples of exotic conifers just being planted in small numbers in amongst the natural regeneration, mainly for amenity purposes. The family are very keen to maintain and uphold. Perhaps this natural regeneration could be further worked, maybe in a coppice, or to coppice with standards, or rotational coppice, or to be left, to naturally, stop watershed and slow that water down, hydrological services, as this steep incline runs down to the cascades at the bottom of this valley, the Moreland stream that obviously feeds the hydro pipe above us. This is an example of the need for access for the family, a policy to be able to get round their woods. This has been recently installed by the forester, and it can involve the family more to get them within the woods to see it, and could hopefully persuade them to encourage them some more interventions. Here is the cascade, the Moreland stream that runs through Trebartha. This valley has seen many storms and was severely affected by the storm of 1986, where a lot of very large larch were blown down, and all the deadwood is being left due to inaccessibility, which is turned out to be a good thing in light of modern knowledge. Here the example of the topped out larch, the standing deadwood, and all the way through is large larch stems that have not been left to degrade slowly. Brilliant habitat for all sorts of creatures. Here the Forestry Commission lease Douglas fir that is block clear flailed and replanted with more Douglas fir. Obviously you can see just from this shot that there's very little habitat difference within that forest compared to the one behind us in Trebartha, with its old growth and varying ages, small coops. Here the loading bay, recent infrastructure to try and get more financial gain from the woodland, being able to run slightly larger machinery, to promote more contracts to thin out for firewood perhaps, or some larger saw logs, to then provide more money to finance replanting or more access tracks. Here the sand pit or quarry that's used to maintain the infrastructure and the tracks. An interesting look at the cross-section of the soil structure here, which is mainly podzolic to granite boulders underneath. Receives a high rainfall, obviously, as it's up quite high on the moors. There's a high wind risk. That's why a lot of conifers are planted and the broadleaves are allowed to regenerate. Here we see the moorland edge, Trebartha, a very important site here, as not much intervention has gone on in the recent years due to inaccessibility, and more recent findings in forestry and ecology that seems to suggest that this area needed to be left untouched to clean water, provide clean water and ecological services. Up the top there we see a large ponticum outbreak planted for cut flowers in the Victorian area, but has now become an absolute problem and needs probably grant help from the government to be able to remove it. Here at Trebartha, throughout the years and history, has seen the landscape change probably quite dramatically a number of times, from the mining through to the Victorians and their establishment of the gardens and exotic conifers being brought in and planted throughout the landscape. And then recently, after the wars, with the Forestry Commission planting strategic reserves, has seen the number of bigger plantations increased with these exotic conifers, mainly Douglas fir, Sitka spruce, larch, and now with the recent family planting mainly for amenity, and the forester planting small coops to fill in areas to make the woodlands more profitable. This has been an example, by coincidence I suppose, of modern forestry techniques to involve natural regenerated areas within plantation areas, and to having varying age groups and varying species dynamics, which can really provide an abundant fauna and flora